Hi, welcome to another episode of FYI Laurel. Today, my guest is Mr. John Matthew Smith, photographer, blog master, and a very interesting storyteller. Welcome to the show, John.
Nice to see you, Oliver.
I met John at the Laurel dog park, as a matter of fact. We were both walking our dogs out there and having fun. And we struck up a conversation, and I found out that he had some pictures of some very interesting people, celebrities and just ordinary people, some of them. He has a vast collection of antiques that we will see at another show. But today we're going to talk about some of the celebrities, and since it's Black History Week, we're going to kind of clue in on some of the black artists that he has. But first of all, John, how did you get into this business?
Well, it's interesting. Years ago, I went down to D.C. on an errand, and I thought, well, I'm going to buy myself a 35 millimeter camera. I never had one, and this was in 1990, and I bought one, and I arranged it to go down that particular day because I knew Mikhail Gorbachev was going to be in D.C. Don't ask me why. I love Gorbachev for what he was doing with the world, and I thought, well, I should just be down there, and maybe I'll run into him, or not run into him, maybe I'll see him, or who knows. Anyway, I bought this camera, and if you know from way back then, he would jump out of the car every now and then and greet the crowd. Well, he jumped out of the car, and I got all these photographs of him. And I ended up selling one that day to Agency French Press.
Wow.
So for the first day with a 35 millimeter camera, I thought, this photography thing is something I think I need to stay with. So I've sort of...
And what year was that?
1990.
1990, so you've been in it about almost 20 years.
Yeah, pretty much, yeah.
Well, tell me about some of the interesting people that you photographed, and talk about how you got in on those pictures. I know you just don't walk up on a set and take a picture. And how does that happen?
Well, a lot of times they have events. You know, the events are what they have what they call a day book. Now, every city has a day book. Washington has a day book. You can get it online, or you get it in other places. The day book tells you everything that's happening in that city that day. Of course, some cities don't need a day book. Where I'm from, Baltimore, they don't really need a day book because really nothing happens there. But D.C. has one, and they need one. Anyway, once you get a hold of the information, you call in, and you know, you tell them that you're a photographer. Is it possible you could be placed on the list? You'd like to come by and take some pictures. For the most part, that's not a problem. They don't give you a whole big thing about, well, did you do this or did you do that? I mean, there's a lot of freelance photographers out there, and then that's how you do it. And then you take it from there, so far as trying to market the pictures.
In going through some of your pictures, I ran across one of my very, very favorite artists and singers, Lena Horne.
Oh.
How did you get that picture?
Oh, geez, you're going to start the interview off with my best story. Well, that was something. In Baltimore, there was me and another fellow. We had I wouldn't say it was a friendly competition, but it was kind of friendly, but kind of not. It was a competition, though, and we tried to keep each other on our toes when one would do something, you know, and he had photographed Lena Horne. And I was really upset about that. and I thought, well, you know, because originally I always wanted to photograph the icons. That was really all I cared about. Not your garden variety star, but your real legendary and your icons. And Lena, of course, surely is there 100 times over. So I got wind that she was having she was going to be a birthday celebration for her 80th birthday. This was in '97, and I made some phone calls and assumed I was going to be contacted about whether I was on the list or not, and no contact came through. There was no contact back to me. And I sat up in my room that morning, and I was used to going to D.C. on the spur of the moment, and maybe I'd get in and maybe I wouldn't. Most times I did. But New York's a long way to go if you're not on the list, you know. But at any rate, I sat there and said to myself, well, if I just sit here, I know what I'm going to get. Nothing.
Nothing.
So let me go and see what happens. So I hop on I took the bus that day. Sorry. And I get up to New York. I'm over at the Lincoln Center. Well, come to find out, even though I was told it was the Lincoln Center, this is not where the press conference / birthday party was going to be. That was kept out of the public, that information. She was going to perform at the Lincoln Center later. So I'm already off to a bad start. But as luck would have it, I happened to catch that inside information, and I went over to the building where it was actually going to be the press conference. It was the ASCAP building. And so I went over there, and I go up to the desk, and there's a gentleman there, and I asked him, I said, my name is John Smith, and I'm wondering if you got me on the list for the press conference. And he said, okay, let me check. Well, he called into the back. He picked the phone up and called. And about 2 minutes later, his phone rings again. He picks it back up. Mr. Smith, I'm sorry, you're not on the list. So I'm like, well, you know, I still figured somehow this was going to work out. Just like I'd found out where the actual press conference was, I wasn't really worried for some reason, you know. But I went down to the hall, the main building, and I thought I would just keep moving through the hallway down there, and maybe Lena would come in, and I just would ask her, you know, I wouldn't just start shooting her. I'd ask her for, hey, Lena, could you pose for a couple or something maybe? But at any rate, this fella came in with all this equipment. He brought all this equipment in, and he was going to the press conference. And I said, you're going to the press conference? He said, yeah. I said, you know, I'm not having any luck getting in there. And he said, well, who are you? I said, my name's John Smith. And when I said I was John Smith and I was from Baltimore, he looked at me like, oh. In other words, that's why he had never seen me before. Right. So we get in the elevator, and I said to him, I said, now, I don't want you to lie. You don't have to lie for me. But please don't volunteer any information. Like he's not with me, you know. So we get out of the elevator, and here's this gentleman comes to greet us as we get out of the elevator. And then I just walked right back with him with total synchronicity, right back into the press room. And but then the new adventure started because they put us in the back of the room because a lot of times they don't treat you so great, you know. And I always relied on being very close to the celebrities to be able to get the best, you know, for the flash to be able to really illuminate them and to get the best details. I couldn't be taking these pictures without a flash from 30 feet. I had no use for them. So what I did was they got us all in the back and they've barricaded us. Literally, we're barricaded. I don't even know why they even have us here if they're going to barricade us. We're barricaded with desks, all of us, and we're all behind these desks. And then everybody starts to come out, and it's I mean everybody. See Cleo Lane, Jesse Norman, Stephen Eady, Cicely Tyson, Liza Minnelli. It's a lot of folks, a lot of big names in that room, and they're all coming out. And then here's Lena coming out at the last. You know, she comes out. Well, we're all sitting like I say behind these desks. Well, the gentleman to my right jumped over the desk. I guess I don't have to tell you who the second person over the desk was. So, at any rate, I was about 8-9 feet from Miss Horn, and I was just shooting away because that's always my rapid style. You know, I'm just shooting like this, and I told her she was lovely, and I wasn't just saying it. I meant it, and especially she was lovely because I had come 200 miles hoping to be standing exactly where I was. So she was really lovely to me. And you know, she looked at me and she said, "I know all about you photographers and your soft soap." Which I knew immediately meant butter up, although I wasn't familiar with that phrase, but I thought that was cute. But yeah, that was quite something. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
One of the other interesting people that I saw in your collection, and she looked like she was feeling sorry for you. and that's Princess Diana.
Oh, that's my other best story. Okay. Well, Princess Diana, she was at the Red Cross down in D.C. And I went down there for the press conference, got there early. Mm-hmm. I always believed in getting there early. There's a lot to be said for that. That way you get a good spot. And so far as taking photographs, your position is really, your position is your perspective. That's everything. I mean, that's everything. If you're off in the corner shooting, your picture's going to look like you were off in the corner. That's what it's going to look like. Well, at any rate, so I was, I had a good spot. And Mrs. Dole, Elizabeth Dole, and Diana came walking down in the courtyard, coming down the little lane to where they were going to sit. And the other photographers, they're all jostling around, and they're all trying to get a shot of them coming down the walkway, which I'm not thinking about that, because I know she's going to land right here at this chair that's right in front of me. You know what I mean? That's what I'm thinking about. So I always stayed focused on that and not getting sidetracked. So, at any rate, she came down and they sat down, and I started taking pictures, and we had a rope there too, and we were like 20 feet away. Oh my God, that's just a kiss of death. It was, I had a little lens, a 70 to 210 lens, but I caught that great photo. And she did feel a little sorry for me, because I was the only person that had this little toy camera. Everybody else was standing there, standing up and with tripods, and the lenses were this long on almost everybody's camera. And my whole camera was this big, And she just looked at me, But, it's not always the strongest that gets the prize, because that photograph was on the cover of U.S. News and World Report. Wow. And it was the bestseller in the history of the magazine.
Oh. One of the other interesting photos that I saw in your collection was Morgan Freeman. Mm-hmm. How did you get to photograph him?
He was. I've seen him a couple times. Kennedy Center Awards. He's been at the Mark Twain Awards. So on the red carpet at the Kennedy Center, and then we had a little side area where we had photographs for the Mark Twain Awards. I liked him very much. He's a really down-to-earth person. Mm-hmm. And since you brought up Mr. Freeman, I've got to tell you, the celebrities, sometimes they get a bad rap, or they're this or they're that. And that hasn't been my experience. There's not very many bad apples that I have met. Mm-hmm. Now, sports figures, I can't vouch for all them. I know there's some bad apples in the sports. But I'm talking about the entertainers. It's hard to find somebody that really is not pretty down to earth. Mm-hmm. And my feeling is about that, and this happened with Natalie Cole, that I learned this. It's very humbling when you're that famous. Mm-hmm. I mean, everywhere you go, people want to say hi or get an autograph or hey, and they feel like they know you and they know your music, and people grew up on your music or whatever your talent might be. Mm-hmm. But it's really very humbling. And a lot of these people, they realize that they've been given a gift, and that they're sharing it with the world. And they're not egotistical in the bad way that sometimes it's painted. They're really, really down to earth. And believe it or not, the vast majority I've seen, they don't have all the bodyguards either. They just regular people. They might have an assistant. They have one person walking with them, but not a bodyguard. Just an assistant that maybe holds things if anybody gives them anything, or So like I say, and again, Morgan Freeman is a perfect example.
Yeah. Before we take a short break, I want to go back to Lena Horne for a minute. What birthday was that you said?
80th.
80th birthday, and you can see by the pictures on the screen, at 80, she was still a very lovely lady. We're going to take a short break, and we're going to come back and talk to John about some of his other famous people that he has photographed, and some of the other experiences that he's had in his 20 years of photography. We'll be right back.
After Sergeant Matthew Kyle was injured in Iraq, his young wife faced the daunting task of getting their VA benefits.
There's a lot of red tape, there's a lot of confusion, there's a lot of forms to fill out.
For years, paralyzed veterans trained experts have helped injured veterans and their families.
We're able to fill out all of the forms and applications and ask for all of the benefits that that veteran's entitled to.
You too can help paralyzed veterans. Visit pva.org.
We're back, and we're talking to my guest, Mr. John Matthew Smith, photographer, and as you've heard at the top of the show, or seen at the top of the show, he has some very interesting photographs of different celebrities. But now we're going to talk about some of the letters and correspondences that he has from famous celebrities. John, what have you got there?
Well, when I saw Archbishop Desmond Tutu at the South African Embassy years ago, I was able to get a great photograph of him, thankfully. And I put this together with some other Nobel Peace Prize winners. Mm-hmm. And he sent me a letter. I got to tell you, it took me a week to figure out what it actually said, but I'll try to read it to you. Again, it's right here. It says, "Dear friend, thank you ever so much for the quite beautiful pictures you have sent, some already framed. Sadly, the one of Nobel laureates came all broken up." It broke up in the mail. "It is a lovely picture collage. I would hope you could let me have another copy. There's the picture of my wife looking at me as I write. Thank you ever so much. God bless you, Desmond Tutu." And the picture of his wife that I also gave him apparently was looking at him while he was writing. But it was very, very kind and wonderful of him to send me this nice note. And of course, I've put another set of pictures in the mail. But this, I omitted the glass.
So what are some of the others that you have there?
Well, I have several letters here from Olivia de Havilland. I saw her later on in my career. She was very, very nice. She was at the Smithsonian. That was in 2000. Yeah, that was quite something. I tried to keep myself together, speaking however briefly to her. Try not to remember like I'm standing here with Melanie from Gone with the Wind. You try to keep yourself down on the earth, which most of the time I never had a problem with. But with her I did. And this letter here, this is from Fay Wray. Now, you folks out there in TV land, if you don't know who Fay Wray is, God knows you should. She's like the mother of modern day cinema, from King Kong. And it was years ago, it was in 1997 now, and I had heard that Muhammad Ali was going to be on Capitol Hill. So I went down to D.C. to go to Capitol Hill to see Mr. Ali, who I had only seen once before. And on my way down, reading the newspaper on the train, I find out that Fay Wray is going to be on Capitol Hill. I'm like, oh my God, Fay Wray is going to be on Capitol Hill? But it doesn't tell you where. It just says she's going to be on Capitol Hill. So at any rate, what I did was I got down, I did the Muhammad Ali interview, or not the interview, it was a press conference. And then I went door to door on Capitol Hill, knocking on every door, wondering if Fay was going to come. And eventually I got to the right door. And they said, yes, as a matter of fact, Fay is going to be here soon. And I said, okay. So while I was in there waiting for Fay to come by, I forgot to send her office, to be honest. While I was sitting there waiting, I heard a commotion in the hall. Some kind of commotion. I was wondering, what's going on in the hall? Well, I walked out, and it was Muhammad Ali. Well, he was coming from the press conference, and he's magnificent. Oh, what a guy. I mean, he just wanted to greet everybody in that building, because the press conference had been over for some time, but he was going through the entire building to greet everybody. He is absolutely great, believe me. Believe me, he's way down to earth. At any rate, I go out in the hall to see what's going on, and there's this little tiny woman, and there's Muhammad Ali. So I get a photo of Muhammad Ali and Fay Wray, the only one that exists, because I was the only photographer in the hall, and I got this great shot of them together. And then Faye came in, and like I said, this rarely happened to me. Rarely happened to me. But you could have knocked me over with a spoon. I could not believe that this was Faye Ray in front of me. I just couldn't believe it. It was too much. And so what happened was, I got to talking, and I got a nice photo of her, and so on and so on. And as I was getting ready to leave, the fellow that was with her, who was her brother-in-law, he asked me for my card, and I gave him my card, but I didn't think anything of it. Mm-hmm. Well, then they contacted me a week later, and it said that Faye would like some of the pictures if possible. Mm-hmm. Well, of course, I could have said, well, sure, okay, well, I'll charge you X number of dollars, and I'm not a rich man, and that would have been the wisest thing to do, but money's only money, and I said, well, I don't want anything in return. I said, other than if she could send me a note, that would be great. Mm-hmm. Well, she did send me a note, and a handwritten note at that, and this is what it says: "Dear Mr. Smith," with the Faye Ray letterhead at top. "This is to thank you for the pictures you recently took in Washington. They do show the good feeling it was to be there. I greatly appreciate your kindness. All the best to you, Faye Ray." And it's interesting because I realized then also that the photos showed what a good time it was. It showed the feeling of that day. Mm-hmm. And I realized that a really good photo would put you there again. Mm-hmm. That really was the definition of one of the definitions of a great photo, to make you feel that you were there again. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So
that's a great story. We're going to take another short break, and when we come back, John has another very favorite story, I'm sure, because he told it to me, and I enjoyed it immensely. So we're going to take a short break, and we'll be right back. We're back with our guest, Mr. John Matthew Smith, and I've been asking John about my favorite stories that I've heard him talk about. Now I'm going to let him tell you some of his favorite things, especially about Black history and his experience of Black history. John, talk to me about some of your experiences that, and some of the Black artists that were your favorites.
Well, I grew up in Carroll County. The one class that I really liked was social studies. My teacher's last name was, I think her first name was Jane, the last name was Scott. And I learned a lot in social studies and history. Really the only class I really cared about, to tell you the truth. And we had a very elaborate education in Black history when I was growing up. Mm-hmm. So that really made me attractive to these larger than life figures. Mm-hmm. To think that maybe that I would ever meet or photograph Rosa Parks was just preposterous that it could even happen. That it could even happen, and to be able to, to actually be in that situation, it's just, and so far as what she did, it has a universality to it. It's a very fundamental thing to be able to sit down. If somebody tells you can't sit down, that's a very fundamental thing. And what she did was incredible. But at any rate, this was back in '93, and it was the 30th anniversary of the March on Washington. Mm-hmm. And I was working part-time with the Baltimore Times newspaper. And the fellow said he's going to pick you up. We're going to go down to the march. So I'm like, okay, good. And I was kind of new at this in 1993 now. I'd just been started. I hadn't, Well, he's from the newspaper. Mm-hmm. So I'm saying, okay, well, he's got some clout. I'm new. He's got the clout. We're going to be okay. You know, we're gonna really rip this place up. We're gonna be good. You know. So at any rate, what happened was, we get down there, and he says, "Come on, let's go, and you can take some pictures of the crowd." And I'm thinking, photographs of the crowd? That's not really what I had in mind. There's crowds everywhere. Crowd is a crowd. I couldn't really figure what he was getting at with that. Well, in the process of me photographing the crowd, him and I got lost in the crowd. I didn't purposely do this. We really literally did get lost from each other. So at that point, I said, well, I'm going to go find Miss Parks. That's what I had on my agenda. And God knows I was looking everywhere. And then there was a VIP tent, and I swore she must be in that VIP tent. So I waited outside the VIP tent. Mm-hmm. And here come a woman who I figured was Miss Parks. I just thought so. Seemed like it. Mm-hmm. She would come out of the VIP tent. I put my arm around her, and I looked at her, and I said, "Are you Miss Parks?" And she said she wasn't. But I was determined. At any rate, well, what happened was there was some guards. They were at the steps of the memorial, and a lot of people were clamoring to go up. And at one point, the guy looked at me like, "I can't tell you that you can go. I can't say go ahead, because this crowd will kill me if I let you up and not them. But if you just go up," without me saying, he kind of threw that message to me. So I shot up the steps. So at any rate, I get up there, and I went up to the very top of the top steps. And I was standing there, just wondering, waiting for whatever was going to happen. And to my left, Mrs. Coretta King. In case it brings tears to my eyes even now. Mrs. Coretta King just walked right next to me, and I started to shake. I started to shake. I tell you, I couldn't believe that was her. So I started taking some pictures. And I took a lot of pictures of her, She just sat there and took a bunch more. And then I thought, well, if Coretta's Miss Parks can't be too far behind. Mm-hmm. So I sat there and I was right. Within 20 minutes or so, Miss Parks also came out, and there was quite a jostling around her, and I was only able to get a couple of photos off, which has never been my trademark. Mm-hmm. Only having a chance to take, I actually was able to take 5 pictures. Never would do that. It's foolish to think about taking 5 pictures. It's just saying I don't want my pictures to come out. Mm-hmm. But of those 5, somehow one of them is one of the greatest photos I ever took. Mm-hmm. It's Miss Parks in profile with her hat. And she's seeing the crowd for the first time that day on the 30th anniversary of the March on Washington. And it is a tremendous photo, and still one of my favorites to this day. Mm-hmm. So
I can see by the emotion that it brings to you now what you must have felt then. Wow.
Well, that's, I think, part of why I did the things I did, because I had to drive. Mm-hmm. I had to drive. I knew that if this certain subject, I wasn't able to photograph them, I was letting history slip through my hands. Mm-hmm. And I never wanted to see history slip through my hands. So mm-hmm. I tried to avoid that at all costs. And it, and every time I didn't know that I would go on to photograph Mrs. King on like 9 other occasions. Mm-hmm. I didn't know that. Or Rosa Parks on 7 or 8 other occasions. And I never took for granted, I always put 110% into every single shoot I went on. Again, particularly when it was a an iconic figure in history, you know. And when I think of Mrs. King, the next person that comes to my mind is Mother Teresa. Here, this is another, you know. I never thought I'd see Mother Teresa in person. God knows, you know. She doesn't even live in this country, you know. A buddy of mine called me up early in the morning, very early in the morning. Well, it depends on what time you wake up, I guess. It was only about, I guess it was around 10, but I used to drink a little into the evening and I'd wake up late. This was way back when. You can cut all that out. But at any rate, he calls me and the phone rings and I pick the phone up. And he says, John, Mother Teresa's in town. And what? John, Mother Teresa's in town. What? She's in town. You know, so I say, okay, I'll play along. She's in town. Okay, she's in town. She's in Calcutta town. You know. No, she's in Baltimore. I said, man, I just woke up. I'm in the bed. Let me go back to sleep. Why are you making these crazy jokes? You know that would just upset me, making these jokes. He says, no. And then he starts reading. I'm like, he's reading. He's reading out of the paper. She's in Baltimore. You know, she's actually there. So I was like, wow. Needless to say, I literally was out.